October 10, 2023, the headline of Economic Times in India read 60 to 70 million people in India suffer from common mental disorders. Moreover, one in every five individuals suffer from some form of mental issues. About 50% cases increased among the age group of 14 years and 75% increased for the age group of 24 and above aligned to mental health problems. According to the WHO, from the last decade, 13% mental health issues have increased among people worldwide. The most pertinent mental health issues are anxiety, stress, and depression. In UK, 8 million people experience anxiety disorder at one single time. Mental Health UK report. Basis the recent stats on the World Health Organization website and an article by Forbes, about 28% increase is seen for depressive symptoms and anxiety issues by 25%. In fact, the World Health Organization (WHO) mentioned in its mental health report, and I quote, "Mental health is an integral part of our general health and well-being and a basic human right. Furthermore, mental health needs are high, but responses are insufficient and inadequate." I wonder, I wonder what is happening. And interestingly, if you try to get to the root of all of this, it will point towards one and only one thing, and that is stress. Well, today in this episode, we will unfold the aspect of stress in a unique way. But remember, mental health is a much broader topic, and in no way what we shall unfold is a solution to the broader mental health issues. However, since stress in many ways is the starting point of mental health issues, we will today unfold the meaning of stress, understand what stress personalities exists within us, and what is our own stress personality with which we can identify and mitigate stress from our lives to ensure we live healthy, because it is our basic right. Welcome again to the episode 2 of the Unfold Learning podcast. Let's begin. The first step will be to understand what is stress. Well, the science of stress is when we experience threat, a real or perceived, our critical thinking and cognition gets impaired, triggering emotions automatically. And the first hit of emotion is known as stress. In many ways, we all have a unique default pattern of thoughts, emotions, and behavior under stress. Meaning, when we experience a threat, and that is a function of our own conditioning and surroundings. For example, if I have grown up in an environment where it was told, preached, or taught to me that it is extremely important to be prepared always, have a plan A, have a plan B, and every time I engage with uncertainty, I think about my own preparedness. And that determines the way I will experience my stress. Because the moment I'm hit with a real or a perceived threat, my mental wiring goes to the thought process of, do I have a plan A? Do I have a plan B? Do I have a plan C? And if I don't, that's what causes me to start stressing. Right? So I hope you are able to make the connection in terms of how stress comes into the picture and what really falls behind it to actually lead to it. Yeah. So before we jump into the stress personalities, you may wonder, why is it even important to discuss about this or to talk about this? Well, the answer to this comes from neuroscience called neuroplasticity, which means that we can rewire our brains to create neural pathways if we are being intentional to impact our thoughts and emotions, especially to catch and navigate our own experiences of stress. Meaning, if we need to address the stress at the first place, it is important to change the way we think during that moment of stress or during the moment of perceived threat or a real threat. Because, my friend, trust me on this when I say this, stress will always be there and we will always react to it. And the only thing in our control will be to recognize it and respond by understanding our own stress personalities. Because these personalities are a function of our conditioning, our context, and the nuanced way of our thought process that exists. And until and unless we are able to identify it first, we will not be able to rewire it or reorient it or reframe it, nor will be able to mitigate it eventually. Okay, so if you are still there, then let's get a level deeper, right? So, who are you under stress? Let me share a personal example with you, and I would want you to really see the pattern as I narrate my own experience. I love traveling, and I have always loved traveling. And other than podcasting, of course, traveling is the thing that I enjoy doing. So, a while back, I was in Europe, in Budapest, and this was my first time, and I was with my spouse, with my partner. The day we landed, we had to catch a train for Vienna or Wien. This meant for us to get out of the airport, catch a bus, reach the railway station on time. Interestingly, we boarded the bus. We could see the stop that we had to stop, but we missed the stop because I was not aware that you need to press that button in the bus to notify the driver that you want to get down. And we missed our stop and we are running late, really late. We missed our stop and ended up being at a different stop, which was about 25 minutes from the railway station. And we only had 30 minutes to catch the train. So we were tight on time. Suddenly, I experienced or perceived a threat of missing the train. And I stressed. I was thinking how stupid I am to miss the stop. I should have booked a flight of a different time to account for such blunders. I should have read more about the intracity transits and whatnot. And eventually, what happened? I really snapped at my partner. And I was feeling a sense of shame too. So, now let's take a pause and, in a similar way, like the way I shared with you my experience, I would want you to think about a moment of stress that you experienced in recent past, or maybe the most stressful thing that you would have experienced, and jot down 3 to 5 reactions. Like, how did you really react to that stress? Great. So I hope you are back, and let's now reflect on the moment to understand what is my stress personality based on the experience that I shared. Now, to do this, it's important that we ask ourselves a few questions. Now, remember, the first step to identify something is to inquire, and that inquiry will happen only when you ask some reflecting questions to yourself. Right? So these are the 4 questions that I'll ask myself. Number one, how did I really feel physically? Yeah, how was I feeling physically at that point in time? So if I actually go back in time, I was physically feeling extremely overwhelmed. I was also feeling very charged because I was kind of like agitated. I was like, what to do now? What emotions felt persistent, right? Now, if I go back in retrospect, the emotions that prevailed very strongly were the emotions of anger, agitation, and shame, because I don't want you to take the pressure of not being able to pinpoint at a particular emotions, right? It could be a function of where you are in your journey, or it simply could be a function of vocabulary. Sometimes I miss on some things because I don't know what to really call them, what words to associate with them. So what I would say is that just put whatever is comes to your mind. Second question was about the emotions that were pertinent, persistent. So mine were anger, agitation, shame, and also I could realize that I was trying to blame situation. I could have done this, I could have booked this, why did I not do this? The bus driver should have told us. And I also blamed my partner, right, in some shape or form. The third question is, what was the thought loop? Where was your mind going again and again? Well, for me, the loop was I should have, I could have, I must, and things like that. And the last one is, how did I really behave? Irritated, snapped, agitated, angry. That's what my behavior was. Again, let's take a pause and do this for yourself. Ask yourself, the moment that you thought about where you experienced stress, how did you feel? What were your emotions? What was the thought loop? And how did you really behave? So now hold on to these thoughts, and we shall unfold the different types of stress personalities and then revisit our own experiences to see with which stress personality we would resonate the most. Great. So, thus far, you're with me and you're doing really good. So, let's move ahead. The stress personality type 1 is the fighter type. Well, typically, such individuals are the go getters in general. So, the fighter type stress personality, their reaction to stress is pretty much they focus on the emotion outside. They try to face the stress head on, right? Where they are feeling a lot of aggression, a lot of anger, a lot of irritation. They also struggle with empathy, compassion, and listening and understanding. And the reason why they react to stress in this way is because the fighter personalities always focus on self protection. They don't want to feel guilty or regret. And there is like a sudden energy crash, like complete drain out. And they rely on some past experiences of the same nature. Probably that is why trying to avoid, those kind of senses. Yep. So now let's again take a pause, go back to our stress personal, go back to our experience. Let me also go back to my experience where I missed the bus stop. And if I look at it, I was actually blaming or rather externalizing a lot. I was very aggressive, charged, I was irritated, right? And typically, that sense of guilt for me was that sense of shame. And the question was, how could I? How could this happen to me? Right? And probably when I now look at this kind of a stress personality type, I realize that maybe that's who I am under stress. Right? So now go back to your experience and see if you are the fighter type or not. We understood the fighter type, right? Now let's move to the second type, that is the runner type. Typically, such individuals are really great assets to the team, by the way, right? So the runner type, their reaction to stress is they would question a lot to self. Why me? Why me? Why us? Right? They would experience sudden panic, anxiety, and an insecurity. A sense of loss is really, really immediate. Negative thought loops aligned to the sense of loss keeps happening again and again. That's how they react to a stress. Right? Now, why that reaction? They value external factors. What will others think? What will they say? How would they feel? Right? There is that sense of avoidance and that sense of confrontation. And they refrain from feedback typically, right? Because they don't want to confront. Yep. So again, let's take a pause. This is the runner type. This is how they react to stress, and this is why their reaction is this way. And the reason why I'm talking about how they react to the stress and why their reaction is like this is because if we are really trying to understand our stress personality types, I mean, at the same time, we also need to start empathizing ourselves. My intention by telling you about these types is not to label any of you in any way, but rather put perspectives, help you have a frame of reference in your thought process so that you understand what happens when something happens and are also able to empathize because now you know the reason why that happens. The third type is the warrior. Oh, my bad. I keep doing this to myself again and again. It's not the warrior, it's warrior, right? Typically, these folks are great team players, right? So, the warrior type, how they react to stress is you will see the statements like, if I just think this through, I can figure it out. If I let my guard down, I know I will make a mistake. If I don't worry about this, then people will think that I don't care at all. In many ways, they talk things through, weigh all their options, and in many ways, and that's a difficult word to say, catastrophize, right? Now, why this as a reaction for the warrior? Because they tend to replay the past failures. That is why the pros and cons, the weighing happens. They also experience distractions because suddenly they will start thinking about so many things that they will lose sight of the focus. And therefore, they struggle to be in the present. And that is where their reactions to stress is in this form. Yeah. Again, let's take a pause, connect back to your experience. Does it align? Does it not align? Personality type is of the freezer. Now, how they react to stress? Well, they can really feel nothing. They get emotionally checked out. They feel drained and numb and are disengaged throughout. Like, for example, if suddenly there is a stress situation, they will appear to be cut off, right? And they have trouble doing anything. They will just either keep scrolling or keep eating. You would have heard about this like stress eating, right? That's what happens. Now, why that reaction? Because there is a deep sense of fear. There is fear of missing out because they always want to achieve everything and anything. There is that sense that comes into play. And therefore, their focus on things that are beyond their locus of control increases. That's the freezer type. The fighter, we did the runner, the warrior, the freezer, and now the pleaser. Now, these types, how they react to stress is during stress, they will appease. They find it very difficult to confront, pretty similar to the one which we learnt about the warrior, right? Pretty same, but the nuance is that they have a sense of fear in terms of losing it all, whereas the warrior was more in terms of what would others think, right? That's the nuance. Now, they will appear very confused when they are stressed. Like suddenly there will be that, confusion that will be all around them. Now, why that reaction? Because they are shy towards guilt. They are too generous and they expect others to be so. And looking good to others matters the most. It's not about what will others think, but they need to think that they are looking good to others, right? So you understand the difference? Now that's the pleaser type. What we will do is we will again go back to each of these types and we will try and understand what are the ways to mitigate it. Right? So, thus far, I hope you have been able to at least identify with one type for yourself, right? But the key point here is to understand what is your dominant trend in terms of reacting, right? And that will help you to funnel on one, because if you're trying to address all the types, then trust me, there will be 10 different things to work on, right? Therefore, it's important to understand your dominant aspect and hit on that more strategically. Yeah. So now actually now shift gears into understanding for each of these types what are the ways to mitigate. So now let's go back to the fighter type and understand, if you are that type, what are the different ways to mitigate it, right? So fighter type typically are the go-getters, right? Only with objectivity and reflection, such stress personalities can navigate their stress situations and respond versus react. Fighter type, what works to mitigate? One, deep breaths. Yeah, it really helps. It helps you to go back and focus at what is at present, right? The second one is quick walks or movements. You would have noticed a lot of people, in fact a lot of people who are individuals, who are athletes, or who are into active sports or anything like that, they would say that, if you stress, hit the gym. uh, mm, and probably they are those fighter types, because movements help them to get back their head into the right place. Music, I have a lot of friends who listen to music like heavy metal, hard metal, and then that just helps them. Or someone gets into that gets into that lo-fi kind of a music and just tries to calm themselves down. The last thing that works the most to address or mitigate the stress for a fighter type is to finding humor, or some positivity in the fiasco, in the chaos. um, and it is difficult to articulate, because I've seen that work for myself and also for few folks around me. But yeah, finding sense of humor in chaos actually helps the fighter type. Yeah. So let's move on to the runner, right? How do you mitigate? Right? We know runners, they question themselves a lot. They feel very overwhelmed. The first thing that they need to do, or they can do, is reaffirmation, which means a lot of positive talk, reframing the situation. So for example, like if I'm questioned, why me, how can I rephrase it to say, why not? Right? And then you start thinking about, in that direction. So basically you switch yourself from going in one side to the other side, right? Backing self really helps, like motivating yourself by telling that, boss, you know how to deal with this, you can do this, you have done this before, you can do this, right? Meditation as a practice, I think whenever you hear the word stress, I think in parallel meditation as a practice comes in. It helps. The other thing that could help a runner is to process alone, like having that, me time. How can a warrior mitigate? The best way is to put journaling time, or to actually schedule a worry time, right? Like actually scheduling, like you're either journaling, or scheduling a time where you will just worry, you will just list down 10 things that is bothering you, right? And that will help you to mitigate your stress. Guided meditations, the reason guided, because if you get into meditation just like that, you might again get lost in your thoughts, because typically the warrior types are, or get distracted during the stress times, and they struggle to be in present. The freezer, the freezer type, for them it is important to set clear boundaries. Journaling helps, and also spending time with their loved ones, I think that plays a huge role. Because they just keep scrolling or eating because they don't feel like doing anything, it's important for them to stay away from distractors, right? The last one, the fifth one, is the pleaser. The pleaser type, again, setting clear boundaries because they would tend to appease. Focus on self care, avoiding being perfect, right? Because you want to look good to others. So probably there could be tendency to be perfect. So avoiding to do that and telling yourself that you are enough and you are enough in all way, right? Great. So, thus far, to understand stress, what we did was we picked up an example, we asked ourselves our reflective questions, and then we moved into understanding the five different types, how they react to stress, why they react to the stress in that way, connected to ourselves, and identifying which type of personality stress do we resonate with, and then of course the ways to mitigate it, right? Now, like I said before, the stress will always be there and we will always react to it, but the most important aspect will be to catch ourselves to navigate through it, right? Please focus on the keywords. I am not saying that you will be able to remove the stress. I am only saying that you will be able to navigate through it or circumvent it. And for that, the most essential aspect will be to know your own personality type. Because if you don't know who you are when you perceive a threat, or if there is a real threat in whatever form, you will never be able to address it, right? So you may feel that you have not gotten to your personality type, but trust me, if you do this exercise, you will get there because it's not that difficult. But it's a practice, and in this practice of observing self, I would say enjoy the process. You are just engaging yourself in understanding yourself better. Yeah. So at the end, I'd like to leave you with these, and I would want to share with you one personality type that we all should envision for ourselves, which is that of the thriver. Folks who believe being grounded. These are those folks who are calm, they think of challenges as opportunities, they focus on present. Pretty utopian, right? Pretty idealistic. But you can actually prepare yourself with this. You can actually build that skill because these thrivers have done that to themselves by practicing the art of resilience, by being more self aware, by being intentional with the choices, right? And the best way has been is to practice gratitude. And I think for me, I envision myself to be that thriver, and it's a consistent process. It's a journey, right? So that's what I would want to share with you. And in doing that, there are a few things that definitely helps in general, irrespective of the type that you are, whenever you engage stress. Because trust me, stress is something that leads to a lot of aspects which eventually becomes a matter of going beyond our locus of control, right? So on a daily basis, if you could do these things, I think that will also help. Like for example, creating a space before you react to a stress. Basically you slow yourself down, right? Control your reaction, take some time, take a pause, and then you react, or rather you'll end up responding better. Well, there is this 3 to 1 technique for practicing mindfulness. Basically, whenever you're feeling that anxiety, whenever you're feeling that stress, do the 3 to 1 thing where you're writing or thinking 3 things that you can see, 2 things that you can hear, and 1 thing you can touch. Trust me, it'll slow you down. Yeah. Engage yourself in a process and a routine, right? I know it gets boring, it gets monotonous, but trust me, it helps. And yeah, so that's my time. Thank you very much for tuning in. I hope you were able to unfold learnings and are taking back key new learnings. I know this has been a long episode, but I think the topic is extremely important, and it is important if we could identify a framework or a frame of reference that will help our thinking process. You can follow me on Instagram, Unfold Learning, and get to see the everyday updates and bite sized learning content. And if you want to only hear me and not see me, then do hit the podcast channel link down below in the description. It will take you to different audio platforms. You can listen Unfold Learning on Apple Podcast, on Spotify, etc., etc. Don't miss to comment. Let me know what you think. Let me know if this has worked, if this has helped. Let me know what are other ways that you use to manage stress. Share this with someone you think will value, and be a subscriber. Till next time, take care of yourself and people around you, and be nice to yourself and people around you. And thank you very much for being there.